The ATF has done it again. 2 men behind bars for doing nothing illegal. Literally nothing illegal. Yet they continue to twist the law and manipulate uneducated jurors and judges in their never-ending crusade to expand the definition of what a machine gun is. First is Matthew Hoover, a YouTuber, father, and Second Amendment advocate who was jailed for simply promoting a product that the ATF labeled arbitrarily a machine gun, leaving his children fatherless and his wife to pick up the pieces. Second, we have Patrick Adamiak, a Navy sailor and businessman facing 20 years behind bars for cut-up parts kits and replicas. Mind you, this man was in his early 20s when he was arrested. The prime of his life, his fiance, his business, all down the drain, just because the ATF needed a target. The ATF went as far to classify an airsoft gun as a machine gun. Hello, my name's Zachary Clark. I'm the social media manager for the National Association for Gun Rights. And today, we have the lawyer representing both of these men here to explain the details of the case and provide us their story. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Matt Larosiere. I'm a firearms attorney, general gun rights attorney, as well as pretty deeply involved in the firearms community in general. And I'm representing Matthew Raymond Hoover before the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in the auto Keycard case, as well as Patrick Tate Adamiak before the 4th Circuit in his case.
So starting off with the Adamiak case, could you give us just like a kind of general overview of what exactly happened to him, what the ATF claimed, kind of just the beats by beats of the case?
So Adamiak's case is interesting because you have to be pretty deep into the gun world, right? Into gun collecting spheres to understand. If you know what a parts kit is, well, then you already know what the main concern in Adamiak's case is. You'll also know that parts kits are sold right over the counter, no problem, no background check, no nothing, because there's no weapons involved. It's all stuff that the ATF has said, hey, this can come into the country and be sold on a completely unrestricted basis because it's been deactivated, right? How did Adamiak even get involved with ATF when he was just selling perfectly legal parts kits on Gunbroker and other websites? It's actually very simple and very stupid. There was an individual in his state who was arrested for being a felon in possession. The guy had already been a felon, and he had some interaction with law enforcement, and they found that he had a .22 in his house, which, oh my God, right? So terrible. And so they were going to put him in jail for a year for being a felon in possession. And they said, but we will let you out if you can give us somebody who is selling illegal machine guns on Gunbroker. That's odd, right? And a very specific request.
It was
but that
very
was
oddly specific, very,
yeah. But that's what they asked of this guy. And naturally, your options are find it or go to jail. And so he found somebody selling parts kits on Gunbroker. And this guy, this felon, who was, again, being basically threatened, bring us something or you're going to jail, was like, well, I mean, those parts kits look easier to do than other ones, is basically what he did. And so he went to the ATF and said, this guy's selling machine guns. And ATF, of course, takes him at his word, despite the fact that the kits were very obviously cut up.
What were the weapons, generous word there in question? I know one was like a demilled RPG, but there was a couple others too.
Okay, so there are all kinds of different types of parts kits, and ATF didn't even care how you cut them up, right? And to make it super clear, a parts kit is something that was a gun that couldn't otherwise be imported, and so they cut it up to make it not a gun anymore, so it could be imported. We see this a lot of times with like old World War II submachine guns and medium machine guns, stuff like that. You can't import machine guns, but if you cut up the receiver, you're good to go. Before, like 2003, you would just be able to cut them with a saw once, and they were good to come in and good to be sold. And these kits are still around, and people are still selling these kits to this very day as early saw cut kits. And they get good money. ATF completely allowed saw cut kits into this country. They know who brought in saw cuts before 2003. They didn't go sending letters and like saying, hey, you can't be selling these or whatever, because obviously they're not weapons. They were allowed to be imported into this country and sold as non-weapons. So again, just based on this criminal informant's word, they send 40 agents to raid Tate's house looking for these machine guns. And would you believe they don't find a single functioning machine gun, right? Shocker. But they scour his whole place, and here's what they did find. They took a whole bunch of guns and claimed all of them were machine guns. And then Interestingly, only one thing winds up getting charged, right? Because none of the things were machine guns. They claimed that like he had flats, unwelded flats for semi-auto Mac 11s. Originally, they wanted to say those were all machine guns as well. He had an airsoft gun, an airsoft M240 Bravo. They wanted to say that was a machine gun. They only went with a PPSH parts kit that was cut, which they called a complete machine gun. And then they also found 2 RPG projectors, right? So, you know, RPG-7. This was one that had a solid aluminum fire control. So you pulling the trigger did nothing. It did nothing.
It's a block.
Yeah, it's a block. A hole in the tube. And then on top of that, big red letters on the whole side of the thing, training aid dummy, inert, right? 2 of those they took. They found that he had bought with a 4473 completely legal an M79 receiver and an M203 receiver. By the way, you can do that. You're allowed to buy that. He had the M79 with a dummy barrel on display, and he had the M203 with a 37 millimeter barrel. On the opposite side of the property, they find in like boxes, because he sold parts, they found some 40 millimeter barrels, and then they assembled the 203 and the M79 together, and said, oh, look, he had a destructive device. Despite the fact is he didn't. He had it in a completely legal configuration. And if you look at Staples, if there's a legal configuration for parts, that's the one you got to go with.
So they charged him for possessing a gun they built and provided him. Well, not even a destructive device they built, and then accused him of essentially having that already in a different configuration.
So this is what he was charged with. A PPSH 41, which we don't know what it was charged as, because the definition of machine gun includes like 7 different possibilities, and it is on the government to tell you which one it is. They charged the whole statute. They never specified what it was. And during the whole trial, they said, oh, well, this is a complete machine gun, or maybe it's readily restored, or maybe it's a combination of parts, or maybe, right? That violates the Sixth Amendment. That's a huge problem. Then they also charged him with 2 RPGs, right, which were inert, could not work, and the government's experts said if you tried to fire that, it would take your head off. But how did they say that it was a destructive device? Well, they tested it and it was functional. How did that test go? They took out the aluminum blocks, went to ATF's reference collection, got a Russian RPG-7, installed all of the fire controls from the Russian RPG-7 into this training aid dummy, then got a subcal training insert. And if you don't know what a subcal training insert, that is something that the Russians made for training on RPGs. It is a complete gun, and it shoots a single 7.62x39 round. It is a gun, right?
Because they have some of those where it like shoots a 22 round out of it, whatever,
exactly.
Even though it's shaped like a launcher.
Exactly. And so they put that gun into the RPG tube, and we're like, the gun shoots. It's an RPG-7. So that was their whole basis here. And again, for the RPG, they never specified how it was a destructive device. They charged the whole statute. And so basically, the best way to understand what happened in Tate's case would be if you were pulled over and arrested for possessing something. Like, let's say you had some green substance, and all the charging document said was you possessed a Schedule 1 substance.
And with no specificity on what, how, where.
Not even Schedule 1. You possessed a controlled substance. Now, and that was it. Like, that's what the charges were, and that's what the evidence was they said, I did something, and left it completely up to the jury to decide legally what this was, which is not how it works. It's a question of law whether something is or is not a machine gun and what type of a machine gun it is. It's a question of law whether something is or is not a destructive device and what type of destructive device it is. And the court just completely failed to engage with that legal analysis. Instead, they said, well, it's a factual question. It's not. It's a legal question. It's a very important legal question. And the fact that it was submitted to the jury, it should have never been allowed.
And I know some articles were talking about how the judge in the case didn't even understand the concept of what a demilled firearm or what a destroyed firearm is, and was struggling with even kind of engaging with that point.
Well, it's because the way the statutes are written, it is hard if you're not somebody like us who's deeply ingrained in the culture and who knows all these different, like, God, think of how many acronyms that we use, right? right? DD, SBR, this and that, the other thing. If you're somebody who just thinks, oh, gun, yeah, my uncle has a gun, right? Which is what most jurists in this country are. It's going to be very hard for you to understand what you're even looking at. And so all you have is the federal government on one side saying, you have the defense saying, which they did, like, hey, you haven't charged us with anything. And then the federal government goes, no, you just said the rocket launcher. And then the judge basically goes, well, they say it's a rocket launcher, whatever.
Just defers to the feds and just doesn't go any deeper with that.
Yeah, effectively. Which is funny because the charging situation in Adamiak is the opposite of the charging situation that we had in Hoover, where they made the complete opposite error and allowed that to go forward, which we'll talk in a little bit.
Right. That's kind of a perfect segue that to go to the Hoover case. If people don't know what that is, that's the auto key card. And it's kind of hard to articulate to people just how dumb this case is and just how everything kind of played out, which is why I'm glad we have you here, because a lot of people get confused. Often I hear, well, he was making auto sears. And it's like, well, no, he was making cards they accused of being auto sears. And then people will make the claim that those cards could be put into a gun and work, like the ATF claimed, which you have, kind of damning evidence against that. So if you want to start us off with just kind of the overview of the Hoover case then.
I represented Matthew Hoover, who was a YouTuber, right, and very aggressive political commentator and a friend of mine, right? He basically got a advertising agreement from a guy here in Florida to advertise the auto key card. Now, what was the auto key card? It was a solid piece of stainless steel onto which a design was lightly etched.
And really quick, I want to explain to people what exactly a auto sear or lightning link is. It's a device that you can drop into your normal semi-auto AR-15 or similar rifle, and it will somewhat unreliably have it function like a normal machine gun. But a drawing or blueprint of one of these isn't a machine gun no more than giving someone a block of steel is selling them a firearm.
A lot of people were confused by this and thought that, oh, well, these were just a thing where you could pop, you could take this piece and pop them out.
Like
right?
It was cut all the way through. It was scored, essentially.
Yeah. So that's not the case. If you ran your finger along the top of it, you could not it would not catch, your fingernail would not catch the line. In fact, here is a piece of paper that my expert put onto one of the key cards and drew graphite over it to try to get an impression of it. He could not, it would not pick anything up. And this wasn't even what we were trying to prove. We were trying to pull dimensions off of it. And then we discovered, oh my God, it's so light that you can't even get a graphite impression of it. And this is the case for all of them, by the way. Even the ones that had the cutouts, the internal cutouts, still cannot get an impression of the lines.
Hoover's being charged even though he wasn't the one who manufactured them, was not the one selling them. He was advertising for somebody. So,
correct. He did not make them. Matthew Hoover was charged with conspiracy to distribute machine gun conversion devices because he talked about a piece of stainless steel with a drawing on it. That's the conduct that's charged. Talking about a drawing. I have seen some of the most hateful and unhelpful comments about my client to people who just really do not understand what's going on. And they, like you were saying, you see people talk about, he was making auto sears or whatever. Okay. Even if that looks like an auto sear, even if it does, so what? It's not a machine gun. It's a drawing. It's a drawing of a machine gun.
You can buy shirts that have auto sear like parts on them. You can buy flags. There's all sorts of things that have technical descriptions or just images of them. And that's not
even
illegal.
The government was saying, oh, well, he could have done a sticker. They said this in the trial. What would be the difference? The government said in the trial, well, why didn't he do a sticker? And then, by the way, one of their experts testified after I pressured them. I asked, wouldn't you be able to do the same thing with a sticker? He said yes. So here's something really important, though. A lot of people think, oh, well, it was exactly geometrically, correct or whatever. If that's true, then how come of all of the witnesses the government brought up, including a person, a professional machinist who worked at a tool and die shop, how come none of them could get the thing to work?
And that kind of just, ties into everything over the last 4 years of the ATF just seeming to get squirrely about rate of fire stuff, whether it be FRTs, whether it be stuff like this, where they really just want to expand the definition of what a machine gun is past any logical reason. And sometimes it seems just to screw people, but other times it seems a little more coordinated.
These people got railroaded for no reason. They weren't breaking the law. Doesn't matter if you think what they were doing was silly or not. They weren't breaking the law. The government has a duty to affirmatively tell us what is prohibited. They don't get to discover what is prohibited for the first time in criminal actions. Tate was selling and collecting cut up nonsense that the government approved the importation of for unrestricted sale. Hoover was talking about a drawing. You can't get around that. Tate was in his 20s, his early 20s when this happened. He had a fiance, that's all gone. He had a business, that's gone. Ripped away from him 20 years. And by the way, the government's already admitted that they couldn't have possibly done a 20-year sentence. And so that's one thing. But still, 10 years of a young man's life. For what? He didn't hurt anybody. He was selling cut-up stuff. Collecting cut-up stuff. And guess what? Who was there for these people? Nobody.
I mean, it is fair to us that we missed this when it was happening. We didn't catch it for whatever reason. We won't give an excuse, but what we're trying to make up for that now by talking about it, by trying to be helpful. But we're not guiltless in this either. We missed both of these cases.
Yeah, no, but hey, I super appreciate that, and that's why I've had a great working relationship with you guys. You're actually pretty straightforward about it. The simple fact is, guys, that this government is completely out of control. They are hostile to you and your rights. And it doesn't matter, how many thin blue line stickers you put on your car. None of that matters. The only thing matters is whether or not somebody in the mid to upper levels of government has decided that you're the one. We just need to do our best to fight for our brothers, because that's what these people are. They're really our brothers. The most effed up thing that I have seen in my whole career, and no one ever tells you about this part of the job. After a week-long trial where I had to watch my client get carted off for not doing anything, taking his suit and his belongings to his wife and his little girls, and seeing her just ask me when she'll see daddy. That's evil. That's evil what they did. And none of us should stand for it. So we're going to keep doing what we can do in the courts. But the simple fact is these people need to be held accountable for violating the rights of our brothers, of American people, for no reason. It's outrageous.
Well, I'm glad we had you on to that. Yeah, that's a try not to cry kind of moment.
No, it was horrible. I bawled like a baby. It was and then Tate. When I talked to Tate on the phone, this is a guy, he's younger than me, and he hasn't seen the outside world in years, right? It's just, you can tell that these people's minds have been irreparably damaged. Even now, if we get them out, nothing's going to undo all that. Nothing's going to undo the fact that they were ripped away from their lives and their careers. For what? Because somebody thought that they went too close to a line without stepping over it? I'll tell you this. If Tate is so dangerous, right, that he should be in jail for 20 years, How come at his separation hearing at the Navy, where there was a very zealous attorney for the government arguing that he should be dishonorably discharged, how come he was discharged with full honors? Full honors. How come Tate gets his GI Bill if what he did was so bad? Huh? Obviously, there's not the majority of people agree with how these people were treated.
And then bless
And just the fact
whoever in the Navy made that call. Bless them for that.
It was a board, and it was unanimous, by the way.
Nice. Any way for anyone to help in either of these cases, whether it's directly to them, whether if you want to plug your thing, just how
Yeah, each of them,
if people want to do something, how do they do it?
each of them have donations. Matt Hoover's wife is alone taking care of their multiple little girls. She could really use your help.
Yeah, we'll put all that down in the description below and make sure people can get to it, just like how we did with the Mark Chapa thing. We just try to help these people out, because even outside of the legal fees, you got to buy diapers, and if the breadwinner's in prison, what do you do?
Yeah.
So.
No, the Hoover's family, like, these are real salt of the earth people, like real, and oh my God, so kind, like just such good people. But they had a traditional single earner household. Right? That's bad. So yeah, like really, I'd really love it if you supported her. I'd really love it if you supported Tate, and if you guys want to support me so that I'm able to do this type of stuff, well, yeah, I've got a Patreon. That's a really easy way to support me too.
We'll be sure to put that and both of the GoFundMes for these men down in the description below. And to everyone who's still watching, just remember, we're all in this together as gun owners and Second Amendment activists, and we have to stand with each other if we want any hope in not just saving these men from the ATF, but possibly never repeating these mistakes or causing more victims like this again.